Welcome to the White Mountain Educational Sunday broadcast. This morning I'm going to talk about the subconscious mind and try to explain what it is. But before I do that, I wanted to share a story by Torgrim Serdarian, which I feel is important. A story about his father that took place over 50 years ago, but would have been a story for today. A story for those who are earnestly involved in living a true spiritual life. And this is what he wrote. He said, "Every day at sunrise and sunset, be in your sanctuary." I remember my father used to walk 3 miles every day to go to a monastery to join the worship at sunrise and sunset. Every time he returned home, he was more beautiful, more magnetic, and more joyful. Once people saw a wolf walking behind him like a lamb. They shouted, "There's a wolf behind you." "Leave him alone," answered my father, and he continued his walk. When I asked about that incident later, he replied, "Animals, trees, and flowers become friends of those who worship. Worship makes them contact the one self, which is also the essence of animals. It's also the essence of flowers and the essence of trees. In worship, the real brotherhood of all living forms is realized instinctively and intuitively." And he concluded by saying, "Make your worship sincere, real, and regular." So today's disciples, those who are in earnest striving to live a spiritual life, those who pray and meditate daily, morning and night, soon realize that they can live within that sanctuary 24 hours a day. When your consciousness resides within the sanctuary of your heart, you are in a 24-hour state of meditation. To be in a 24-hour state of meditation means that you are no longer controlled by the contents of the subconscious mind, because the light of your consciousness dwells in the higher mind, or even in higher levels. Such people are, to me, special. They are extraordinary, they are unique, and they are way showers. They are not mechanical. The subconscious mind of others cannot control them. This is why today's message is so important to every single one of us that are on the spiritual path. Oftentimes when people think about a spiritual path, they think about those that are kind of weird, that they dress a bit oddly and eat a bit oddly. Their diet and nutrition is a bit odd, and they think of us as just being out of sync, with the rest of humanity. And yet that is not true at all. People who are on the spiritual path are in harmony with nature, not in disharmony with life, not in disharmony with nature, not in disharmony with the beauty of life. They have a rhythm, and people who have this kind of rhythm are people who are not controlled by their own subconscious mind or by the subconscious mind, other friends and co-workers and just people in general. So it is a real gift that we're giving to ourselves to walk on a such a spiritual path that teaches us how to gain control over our subconscious mind, and how to recognize it and how to realize it. Today's disciples are not spiritual pretenders. They do not repeat the teachings to demonstrate to others how spiritual they are. They are examples of the teaching, examples of the legacies of the great ones, what the great ones have given to humanity. One day, a great Lama was bestowing teachings on a large gathering. I just love this story. I know I'm interrupting myself, but I just love it. You're going to laugh at the end, sort of, maybe. So let me start again. So one day, a great Lama was bestowing teachings on a large gathering, and an old lady came to receive the empowerment. In Tibet, it is customary to present a goodwill offering at the end of such an empowerment as a token of gratitude, often accompanied by a white silk scarf, which is symbolic of inner purity. Now, this old woman had a kilo of fresh yak butter to offer, one of the principal mediums of exchange in Tibet. It was in a satchel under her cloak, and she intended to offer it to the master after receiving his blessing. However, this day, there were a great many recipients gathered, so when the Lama reached the portion of the empowerment during which he would ordinarily touch each disciple on the head with this sacred vessel filled with nectar, he simply instructed them all to visualize the vase that he was holding on his head and to imagine him placing it atop of their heads. The faithful old lady, needless to say, did exactly as instructed and received the initiation in its entirety. But when the rite was complete and it was time to offer her precious butter to the Venerable Master, she merely stood up and uttered in a stern voice reminiscent of the Lama's and echoing his own words, "Now, simply visualize, Venerable Lama, that you are receiving an offering of this kilo of fine butter that you see in my hand." And then, chuckling to herself, she made her happy way homeward, a wiser and wealthier woman indeed, with her butter tucked safely away in her arm. This woman was awake, using the light of the higher mind and not under the mechanics of the subconscious mind. The ageless wisdom uses the term subconscious mind to refer to a special diskette which records all that we think, imagine, dream, hear, smell, and feel while we are in a state of unconsciousness. The subconscious mind is filled with all of our automatic thoughts and speech and actions. When we have no power over them, they often lead us into embarrassing and difficult situations. Now, in addition to the subconscious mind, we also have a higher mind. Within our higher mind is found a chalice, which is one of the parts of a psychic mechanism built within the sphere of our human mind. The chalice serves us as a treasury during our times of need. It also provides us with vision and hope for the future. This is the chalice of which we all have. Within this treasury, our chalice is saved all that we think, speak, and do in harmony with the 7 principles that the teaching so strongly gives us. These principles, we are told, are beauty and goodness, righteousness and joy, freedom, striving toward perfection, and sacrificial service. All such thoughts and words and actions are collected within our inner treasury, and they serve us as a savings account for the future, to be used in many lives to come. And in the Bible, this treasury is called grace. I'd like you to take some time later today and maybe on throughout this week to think about the times you have received grace. I was just thinking about recently, this woman nearly lost her home in a fire, but she didn't. Her next door neighbor did, but she didn't. She had smoke in her home, and an attic filled with smoke, as I understand it, but her home was not touched by the fire. This is called grace. Think of the times that you may have been involved in a horrendous automobile accident, but you were saved and you were safe. And yet others were not. Why is that? Some people call it karma. Other people call it grace. Grace that's the result of your actions, your sacrificial service in previous incarnations, of when you gave yourself to others, and now you receive grace. When the light of your consciousness penetrates the sphere of your higher mind, a paramount change takes place. What is the change? You become more inclusive, universal. You no longer think about me, but you begin to think about others, not just others in your community and the country you live in, but others that live in other countries, that speak other languages, that are born into other cultures. You become universal. You're heroic. And you're sacrificial. You think and feel and act in terms of wholes, not in parts. Your measures, your values, your interests change immensely. Contact with this field of energy, your transpersonal self, brings fundamental changes to your life. Now, however, just the opposite is true regarding the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is also called the lower mind. The lower mind is mixed with the emotions and the chaotic life of a person's personality. When the consciousness of a person is anchored in the lower mind, that person lives through the command of their emotional drives and urges, and instead of leadership of their reason and logic. In addition to the higher mind and the subconscious mind, we also have what's called body consciousness. When a person has body consciousness, their thoughts and emotions and actions serve the interests of what? Yes, exactly, of that person's body. When the person raises their consciousness from the body consciousness to the astral or emotional consciousness, all of their thoughts, emotional responses, reactions, and physical actions serve the interest of their body or their emotions. Then there's a person who has an awakened consciousness, which is a person who functions in the light of their soul. And finally, there is what we call, what we know as continuity of consciousness. Continuity of consciousness, which is sometimes called the rainbow bridge, comes through us when we become aware of the soul's activity. This means that we can now raise our consciousness beyond the subconscious, beyond the astral and mental planes, and we achieve monadic consciousness. This is what's called continuity of consciousness, communication with higher spheres, with what's termed the fiery worlds. And we register communications in our brain of these fiery worlds, these higher worlds, all the time in our brain. At this level of consciousness, we can at will enter sleep, emerge from our body, consciously communicate with our fellow disciples and souls. And then we remember these events in detail in our waking consciousness. This is not fantasy, but fact. You can learn more about these kind of experiences in the teachings of Agni Yoga and the Ageless Wisdom. Now, the subconscious mind, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail here. The subconscious mind is in the levels of the mental plane that are submerged below the threshold of our consciousness. I'm going to repeat this. The subconscious mind is in the levels of the mental plane that are below the threshold of our consciousness, our conscious mind. It is the repository of all disjointed, now I'm talking about the subconscious now. It is the repository of all disjointed experiences of pain, suffering, fear, and confusion. These experiences can actually be mixed with joy or with sorrow. One of the greatest healing processes will begin when we begin to free ourselves from our own subconscious mind. For clarity, let me repeat that the conscious mind refers to the fourth subplane of the mental plane. Now you've got to visualize 7 subplanes, and all these 7 planes represent the mental plane. The conscious mind refers to the fourth subplane of the mental plane. The subconscious mind is located, in other words, in the lower mental planes, the 7th and the 6th and the 5th subplanes of the mental plane. If you can draw a diagram, it will help you visualize it a little better. 7 subplanes, and the subconscious mind resides in the 7th, 6th, and 5th, which is below the threshold of the conscious mind. The conscious mind is on the 4th subplane, right? Okay. Then, doesn't stop here. Then there is the super consciousness, which is the higher levels of the mental plane. So the super conscious levels would be the third, the second, and the first. That goes from the lower to the higher to the higher to the higher. From the third to the second to the first subplanes, or the levels of the higher mental plane. So this tells us that the superconsciousness functions when our consciousness moves into the higher mental plane. It is functioning in the third and second and first subplanes of the mental plane. However, any plane beyond the mental plane we can consider as a superconsciousness when we are aware of all that is going on there. So this is our future. Now, I'm not stopping here. Now we have a term called the unconscious. There's two, you can spell it two ways, and the way I'm spelling it, because of the way I'm going to reference it now, is with a capital U. We also have the lowercase u, which I'll talk about later, but now I'm talking about the uppercase U. The unconscious, the uppercase U, unconscious, refers to those states of consciousness that stand outside of our conscious reach. For example, such states of consciousness are found in the spiritual triad and in the monadic and divine planes, which are out of the reach of most people. There are also even higher states of consciousness called planetary and solar consciousness, which for us are states of unconsciousness. Now back to the subconscious. It is only in our non-conscious moments. Non-conscious would be unconscious with the lowercase u. Non-conscious is the same as unconscious with the lowercase u. It is only in our non-conscious moments that the subconscious mind operates, registers events, and affects our life. What may be shocking to know is that most of the time humanity is we are told humanity is 80 to 90% in a non-conscious state of being. Isn't that shocking? I mean, it's just shocking when you read these facts. In non-conscious moments, whatever we feel, whatever we imagine, a non-conscious I'm talking about, whatever we feel, whatever we imagine, whatever thought forms we identify ourselves with, goes into the subconscious mind and accumulates there age after age, life after life. The subconscious mind increasingly has control of a person's thinking, their conditions, and their actions. The world conditions are in such a state now that the power of this subconscious mind is daily increasing. And if it continues in such a way, in future decades, people will totally act like robots. And we're seeing this happen now. And it's called mass consciousness. Now there's essentially 10 points that we define as non-conscious moments. Non-conscious moments are those in which you have passed out. You become unconscious. That's when the subconscious mind is fed by your environment, by noises, by what people say, because you're in a state of unconscious, and that then feeds the subconscious mind. When you're depressed, when you're touchy, when you see horrors, why you don't want to, you should choose not to go to horror movies or read horror books, because it intensifies your emotional, your astral body so much that it evokes fear within you, creates imagination. This then precipitates down, 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 down into the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind, and you carry it with you from one incarnation to another, to another. This is when you see horror. I think back when, no, I'm not going to talk about it. Never mind. I don't want to stimulate those horrific visuals that we saw. Number 5, you are under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or under anesthesia. 6, when you are hilarious, excited, or spacey. 7, this is interesting, when you are in pain. Becomes a non-conscious moment for us. When you are intensely irritated or even revengeful, you're in a non-conscious moment. When you live in vanity, this also puts you in a non-conscious moment. And number 10, when you are hypnotized, all these 10 points continue, if they continue on in such a way, in future decades, people are going to totally act like a robot. So we must be in a conscious state and strive to purify the contents of the subconscious mind. Of course, the list is longer, but the important thing is to know that in such moments, our subconscious mind is actively registering events and controlling our behaviors. The subconscious mind not only registers things when we're awake, but also when we're sleeping. When we are sleeping, we can sometimes meet with the same negative conditions in the astral plane as we had in the physical plane. During these moments, we collect astral events in our subconscious mind. Can you relate to this? Of course we can. I mean, we don't want to relate to these things. We don't want these events to take place. But until we become spiritually awake, our soul is functioning now in the higher mind, in the superconscious mind, we are going to default to these experiences. What happens is when the subconscious mind accumulates a sufficient amount of events, it slowly blocks the conscious mind, takes control, and rules our life. At this point forward, your life acts by push buttons and triggers. Push buttons and triggers. Any associative event puts your subconscious mind into action. Even if 10%, if only 10% of your consciousness is intact, the subconscious blocks that too and dominates your life. What is startling is that almost all the people who are acting under the domination of their subconscious mind, they are not aware of it. And they think that they are normal. And they think that they are conscious people, consciously thinking and living in the world. There are two things that we can do to make a breakthrough by recognizing that we might be acting under our subconscious mind. The first is to learn how to observe your behavior, your thinking. Observe your thinking, observe your speech, and also observe your actions. If this step number 1, is not successful, then try to find a person that you can trust, a person who is awake, and ask her to observe you and tell you the moment you stop being conscious and fall under the dominance of your subconscious mind. This is why you must have a truthful, awake, and alert friend or a teacher who will watch you and let you know when and how you acted under the subconscious mind. Once your friends or teacher makes you see the moments and character of your changes, then you can start observing yourself and find some very interesting ways your subconscious mind acts and manifests. For example, your friend or teacher that is observing you will reveal how certain times you just act weird. When you were real and when you were unreal. When you were natural and when you were changing or coming under the influence of your subconscious elements. And when you were coming out of the dominance of your subconscious mind. So here's a list of questions you can ask yourself if you think you are operating under the dominance of the subconscious. I will say that, in creating these questions, I still encourage you to find a trusted friend to help you with this, or a teacher, an awakened teacher that can help you, because what happens, we have, obstructions to our consciousness beyond what I've said here, and these obstructions are called Maya and glamour and illusion. And so oftentimes when spiritual people reach a certain level of beingness, they become their own authority. And that in itself, I have found, is one of our biggest obstacles, is when we become our own authority until we can function in this constantly, continuously in the superconscious mind. So it is safer for you to find that trusted friend or find an awakened teacher and then take this list of questions. There's only 5 of them I'm going to give you, and now you can ask yourself as well these questions. The first question is, why do I feel like this? The next question, why do I think like this? The third question, is this really me or something else? The fourth question is, why am I living the way I am living? And the last question is, why can't I make a breakthrough with this particular issue? Powerful questions, but you understand what I'm saying now is that get some help. It will speed the disintegration of the subconscious mind much more rapidly, instead of taking lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. And see, I know one of the questions that you may have asked is, do we take the subconscious mind with us from one life to the next, to the next, to the next? In actuality, in some sense we do, but literally we don't. All of our thoughts and feelings and actions that go against the purpose of our soul, against the purpose of our monad, against our life purpose, just against the beauty of nature, gets recorded in what's called permanent atoms. The physical permanent atom, the astral permanent atom, the mental unit, and the mental permanent atom. Now, what happens is that when we come back into incarnation, the devas that help us formulate our personality bodies take the substance of the old subconscious mind, the previous subconscious mind, rebuilds the subconscious mind from the storage of these permanent atoms. And now we have another very active subconscious mind. As our control increases over our thinking and talking and feeling and acting, that if we have control over these things, now the subconscious mind decreases and slowly vanishes. It takes a lot of hard work, but eventually it just seems, to me, it's almost magical. It's like I could take my violin, or you could take a piano that's out of tune. As you're playing it, I mean, anybody that's got a good musical ear knows that the strings of that violin are out of tune. The strings on that piano need to be tightened up. They need to be tuned. All you have to do is to bring a tuner in to tune that violin, the strings on the violin, or the strings on the piano, and now you're in harmony. So what we're doing is tuning the subplanes, the 7th and 6th and 5th lower subplanes, the planes below the conscious mind, and we're tuning them to our life purpose, tuning them to the rays of our soul in such a way now the subconscious mind disappears, and when we come back in our next incarnation, we are no longer functioning in those 7th and 6th and 5th levels of the subconscious plane. We're not there. Our consciousness is no longer there. When our subconscious mind controls our life, our consciousness cannot expand, cannot develop. You cannot advance spiritually because you cannot see reality. The subconscious mind cannot create a stable family, cannot have good relations with children, especially when your family members fall under the dominance of their subconscious mind. People inherit their subconscious mind from many, many lives through the recordings of their permanent atoms. People also accumulate certain treasures in the higher mind, in their chalice, the grace that I was talking about. The treasure in your chalice always increases if you try to be healthy and happy, prosperous, enlightened, free, and strive toward perfection. Thank you.